Coding can sometimes feel like a pretty solitary activity. But what if your code editor had a pet? Imagine a nostalgia-infused, cutting-edge AI companion living right there on your desktop, reacting in real time to your every keystroke and line of code. Sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, right? Well, it's completely real, and it is absolutely changing how developers interact with their workspace. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something super fascinating that OpenAI recently dropped into their Codex desktop app. They're called Codex Pets. Now, on the surface, this just looks like a fun little Easter egg, but underneath, it is a Trojan horse of truly brilliant user experience design. So, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by meeting your new coding companion, then we'll walk through how to hatch a pet, check out a really clever RunComfy API alternative, talk about perfecting your pet prompts, explore the massive sharing community, and finally, unpack exactly why Codex Pets matter. All right, part one. Let's meet your coding companion, the AI-powered desktop pet. So what exactly are we talking about here? Basically, Codex Pets are these customizable, animated companions that live right inside the OpenAI Codex desktop app. And I want to be clear, these are not just silly, static novelties. They're state-based digital companions. They actually reflect the app's real-time status through behavioral animations. They just hang out in this little overlay in the bottom right corner of your screen, which means they persist even when you're using other apps. It's a really clever way to keep you connected to your code's progress. If you peek under the hood at how this works, the animation file is actually just a sprite sheet grid. It maps directly to Codex's real-time status, changing rows based on whatever the AI is doing at that exact moment. So row 0 is your idle state, usually just calm breathing. But then, say you get an error. It jumps to row 5, which triggers a failed state with a sad or deflated reaction. Row 7 is for when the code is actively running, and row 8 shows the pet in a focused review state. Basically, it gives you immediate visual feedback without you ever having to dig through a log file. Moving on to part 2, how to actually hatch a pet using the official skill. If you've got Codex Pro and you have access to the built-in image generator, getting one of these little guys is wonderfully straightforward. First, you just type $skill-installer hatch pet straight into the Codex chat. Next, you do a force reload of your skills using Control or Command K. Then you just type hatch pet followed by your prompt. Once it's all ready, you just wake your pet up by selecting it in the appearance settings under Custom Pets. Super simple. And once you hit enter on that prompt, Codex kicks off this automated 4-step internal process. It gets the pet ready, imagines the main look, pictures the poses, and finally hatches it. The whole thing takes maybe 2 to 5 minutes. It generates the required pet.json manifest and the sprite sheet file entirely on its own. You literally need zero graphic design or animation experience to do this. Okay, but what if you don't have Codex Pro? That brings us to part 3, the RunComfy API alternative, and how to save some serious API calls. Look at the crazy difference in API costs here. The official hatch pet skill requires Codex Pro, right? And it eats up to 72 separate image generation API calls just to create the 72 individual cells for the animation atlas. But the RunComfy skill is this brilliant drop-in workaround. By using a RunComfy token and having ImageMagick installed locally, the cost plummets to exactly one single API call per pet. No way, right? So how on earth does it achieve that massive cost saving? It's all in the pipeline. First, it uses that one API call to generate a single canonical pose on a bright magenta background. Then it uses ImageMagick to chroma key that magenta out to a transparent alpha layer and normalizes the cell size. Third, it programmatically stacks these tiny 1 to 2 pixel shift microtransforms. Think like a subtle head bob or a little blink, and it uses those shifts to build out all 9 animation rows. Finally, it stitches it all together into a 1536 by 1872 pixel atlas. It's totally deterministic and perfectly mimics the official animation style. All right, part 4, perfecting your pet prompts, the art of the hatch. Because look, you're the director here and a basic prompt like cute dog just isn't gonna cut it. There are a few mandatory prompt locks you need to use. You absolutely have to lead with exaggerated chibi proportions, so the character's head actually fills that 192 by 208 pixel bounding box. If you're using the alternative method we just talked about, you have to demand a magenta chroma key background because AI models just don't natively handle transparency very well. To make it fit the app's vibe, ask for a pixel art adjacent, chunky silhouette, and most importantly, you have to define explicit state-based actions. On the flip side,
There are a few huge red flags you want to avoid. Do not ask for generic, transparent backgrounds, or the AI is just going to give you these weird, near-white backgrounds that clip terribly. Never let the model freestyle the proportions either. It'll almost always draw a tall, narrow figure that just looks awful when squeezed into a square frame. Don't mix styles, and for sure avoid asking for glossy 3D or heavily rendered anime art. It totally breaks that clean, pixel art house style. To put this into perspective, check out this awesome example from Standout Digital. The prompt is, Hatchpet, create a mechanical tortoise. When error, shell turns red, tortoise retreats into shell, peeks out nervously. I love this. By scripting funny, specific error states, you give the pet actual personality. It literally takes a frustrating moment, like your code failing, and turns it into something that actually makes you smile. Which naturally leads us to part 5, the pet sharing community. It is a thriving ecosystem. Just look at this number, 4,952. That is literally how many custom pets are available to download right now on the codexpet.xyz community hub. An entire, massive open source ecosystem has just exploded around this single feature. And this central hub is incredibly robust. It seamlessly connects everything, browsing, editing, validation, sharing, all into one workflow. It has a browser editor specifically for tweaking the animation grids. It runs visual checks to make sure your transparency specs match the codex format perfectly. It allows for community remixing and publishing variants. And it even has curated themed collections, everything from retro pixel art to cozy anime mascots. People are sharing everything from a classic pixel pup to literally an animated piece of toast named Toast Buddy. It's amazing. Developers are just freely sharing thousands of these creations. It's this perfect, wholesome way to neutralize the inherent stress of software engineering by just dropping a playful, user-generated friend right into a workspace. Finally, we arrive at part 6, why Codex Pets actually matter. Let's talk about the psychology of UX. You might be wondering, why did a serious software company build a digital toy? Well, the UX psychology here is absolutely brilliant. First off, it offers status communication without interruption. Ambient awareness completely replaces progress bars. Just a quick glance at your jumping pet tells you if Codex is working. It completely changes how you interact with the IDE. Second, emotional attachment drives retention. Users customize a pet, name it, and they just keep coming back to it. And third, community sharing acts as a massive growth engine. Every single developer sharing a pet online is basically free distribution for the platform. I think the folks at Standout Digital hit the nail on the head with this quote. OpenAI isn't adding a feature, they're adding a reason to stay. In a super crowded AI coding market, giving users customization and creating an emotional attachment inherently drives product loyalty. It's genius. And honestly, the community is already taking this way further. Over on GitHub, issue 20863 shows power users are demanding the ability to extend the pet.json manifest. They don't just want the default behaviors. They want custom event triggers, configurable animation sequences, and tweaks timings. They want to move way past the hard-coded 9-row renderer to allow for super deep programmatic customization. So, that brings us to the end of this explainer, and I have to ask, what kind of coding companion are you gonna hatch today? And maybe the bigger question is, as these ambient AI companions start replacing traditional loading bars and error logs, how long until these pets break out of our code editors and into every other app we use? Think about it. Thanks for joining me, and happy coding!